What about John? What's going to happen to him? And Jesus he said it. If it's my will that he tarries until I return, what is that to you? You follow me. I know sometimes we get on to other believers and we say, well, God, what about them? Why don't you straighten them out? And his answer is the same. You don't worry about him. You follow me. I think I've been a Christian now for 40 years, I think. I think it was like 1982. Thanks. It would have been easier if God would have just made all of that clear to me and explained to me why this person's life is more blessed than mine. Don't you think? If God would just come out and tell us, you're going to have a good life until you're, in your late 70s, early 80s, and then, but so-and-so over here is going to live to be 90 or so. Well, why? Wouldn't it be nice if he'd just answer you? Wouldn't it be nice if he just answered you concerning why some people prosper in this world and some people don't? God doesn't always just give us the answer that we're looking for. You know why? Because he's very much interested in us living the process of life. And that's where we learn more about him. And so it really doesn't matter what other people do, what other people say, how other people act or react. What really matters is how am I doing in the process of life that God has given me? Jesus said in Matthew 5:43, to love your enemies, bless them that curse you, do good to them that hate you, pray for them which despitefully use you and persecute you, that you may be the children of your Father which is in heaven, for he makes his sun to rise on the evil and on the good, and sends rain on the just and on the unjust. If you want to have a clear conscience toward God concerning the things of ministry and your life, do your best all the time to do this life and this process of life God's way. That's what he's called us to do. Keep our focus on him. Hebrews 12, 1 and 2. I mean, keep your eyes on Christ as you run this race. Do things right and fair. When you're at work and nobody's looking, do what you're doing based on the idea that you're doing it for God, that you're doing it for Christ. In other words, don't take an hour for lunch and write down 30 minutes on your time card. Don't show up late and then leave early to make up for it. That don't work, right? Now, I've known people that do all this stuff, and then they wonder why they get in trouble. They wonder why things aren't going right. And I think God just calls us to be the best we can be all the time in his presence. All right, be in your outline. The great plan of God for me is in the process. One of the dangerous attitudes that I see in the Christian world of serving God is that people are more interested in power than they are the process. Instead of living out a relationship with God in the process of life, they would rather live for themselves and then ask God for a miracle when things get rough. And I think that there are those two categories of people. There are people that just live from one miracle to the next, and they're just constantly in need of another miracle. And I believe that if we understand the ways of God and we apply those ways to the process of our life, we will avoid a lot of the circumstances where we need a miracle. That makes sense? I think we will avoid a lot of those circumstances where a lot of people are just asking for miracles. It's the difference between knowing the acts of God. Remember the Psalm 103 verse 7 says that God made known his ways unto Moses, his acts unto the children of Israel. Israel was all about the miracles. They, the parting of the Red Sea, the fire by day or fire by night, cloud by day, and water coming from a rock, manna falling from heaven. They were all about the miracles, and they were just going from one miracle to the next, to the next, to the next. Whereas Moses was beginning to understand God, and he was learning the ways of God. I think this might be in your outline. 2 Peter chapter 1, verse 3 says, according to his divine power, he has given unto us all things that pertain unto life and godliness through the knowledge of him that has called us to glory and virtue, whereby are given unto us exceeding great and precious promises, that by these you might be partakers of the divine nature, having escaped the corruption that is in the world through lust. And there's two things about verses 3 and 4 here. One, he has given unto us all things that pertain unto life and godliness through the knowledge of him. The key to making the most of the process and finding the power of God in the process is found in the knowledge of him. I think it was 9 times the word knowledge was used in the first part of 2 Peter chapter 1. It means that we are to learn more about God. We are to learn more about Jesus, be committed to learning and growing and living by faith in the promises of God. I mean, most people can't talk about the promises of God. They don't know what those promises look like. And that's why I'm trying to make a thing out of thinking biblically, because as we begin to think biblically about the ways of God, more and more we have the power in the process of life to not get beaten down and give up. We're all in the process right now. What are you using for strength to get through the process? Learn more about Jesus. Secondly, he wants us to be biblical through the promises, that we might also be partakers of the divine nature. And we like to make that divine nature to mean miracles when we need them. And that's not all that there is. The divine nature speaks just as much to our nature, character, lifestyle, which is the process God chooses for us, as it does just miracles when we need them. He wants us to have the power of his word in the process of our life, our character, our nature, in this process. So in other words, you can avoid the need for many miracles just by living with the right attitude and character in the process of life. Number one, all that God offers begins with a commitment to believe. Now, I know there are a lot of people say, I believe in God, right? You've heard that before. They don't live like they believe in God. They don't do things that prove that they believe in God. But I'm saying there's more than just believing in God. 2 Peter chapter 1 verse 5 says, beside this, giving all diligence, add to your faith virtue, and to virtue knowledge, and to knowledge temperance or self-control, and to self-control patience, and to patience godliness, and to godliness brotherly kindness, and to brotherly kindness love or charity. And I don't want to imply here that God no longer does miracles, because I believe he does. Don't you? And I'm not just saying that from understanding of Scripture. I have experienced some of God's miracles. And I believe that most of you have too. I believe he still does. But I can't always explain why God does the things that he does. I'm there, and I'm willing to admit that. I know when you get saved and you give your life to Christ, there are some things about your life, some habits, problems, difficult issues that God just seems to fix or take away, never to be an issue again. They just leave like a bird falling out of a tree, and you're just done with that. And then it happens when you get saved, just when you give your life to Christ. But for a lot of people, there are some things that just seem to hang on, or they come back. And I understand it should not be that way, but many times it is. But I believe that these are the things where the power of God is revealed for us in the process. I believe that God's power can be revealed in the process of our life to not only remove things, but to improve things in so many ways. If God just fixed all of our problems on the spot, in a miraculous way, then this relationship becomes more about the acts of God than it does about the ways of God. There are people everywhere who are always looking for a shortcut with God. God, just fix this. Just take this away. Just, make me rich. You've never heard anybody ask that of God, have you? God, just make me rich. But that's a shortcut. We like the shortcuts when we can take them. Jesus gave us access to a shortcut because we could have gone our whole life trying to work for salvation and forgiveness and never attained it. But he gave us a shortcut by going to the cross. Instead of sending us to the cross and us dying and shedding our own blood, Jesus did all of that for us as a shortcut to God the Father. And that's the only hope that we have for salvation and for forgiveness and for a future in eternity with God, is what he provided. But everything else in life doesn't work with shortcuts. He wants us to be more in the process, learning the ways of God, growing in our knowledge of him, than he does just giving us one shortcut after another after another. All right, I'm going to cut it off there. Number 2, you want the words that go in there? Number 2 is true faith finds a way to believe all that God has said. I want you to look at these sermon notes between now and next week, and I'll finish this up next week. But it really helps when you learn some things on your own. Number 3, add to your faith an external demonstration of strength. Number 4, let your faith and virtue motivate you to deeper knowledge. And then number 5, being biblical translates into self-control. Now, the one thing that I just couldn't help but bring up was this. I'm not a trainer, and I don't compete with weights and all that. I probably could compete in the Mr. Universe competition, but I won't do that. But I've been in the gym long enough and around enough people that go to the gym. I've heard this, and you may have heard it too. They're frustrated. People get frustrated that they're not seeing any results. They go to the gym 4 or 5 times a week. They work hard, lift weights, maybe do the treadmill, and then they're frustrated that they're not seeing the results that they're looking for, because there's another component to the right results. And one thing you'll see in 2 Peter there is he talks about those who compete. People that compete in the Olympics, you can tell by looking at them they've worked hard to get there. Watching football games on TV, how does that go? There's 22 people on the field that desperately need some rest, and there's 150,000 sitting in their chair that desperately needs some exercise. That's kind of the way it goes. But if you don't get results in the gym, the diet is a part of it too. You can't live off of donuts and Doritos and expect to lose weight and become fit. This is the way it is in the process that God has put us in. It can't just be hit and miss, partially in, partially out. We really need to do it God's way.